Hello everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. So, before we go anywhere, I've been very forgetful about this, so I'm going to start right away with the sponsor list because we had somebody added to it and it is fresh on my mind. So for anyone who hasn't been keeping up with Mondays, we've started a sponsor list over on Patreon for people who want to help combat hashtag demonetize, where a lot of video content is getting demonetized on YouTube, blah blah blah, I've said this every week. And so we've had a bunch of people supporting over on Patreon, and so I just name them either at the beginning or end of every episode, depending on how my brain actually decides it wants to process what I need to do for the day. So, we're going to start off with our standard sponsors. Our new one, Ashen and Emiya of Cerberus. Welcome, welcome. We have MrSynestrrr, we have Argoti, Fafarian, Rendil, Giraffeswillrule, Stevie-Rex, and Neon, all standard. Is Neon a standard? Neon's a standard. Yeah, Neon's a standard. You demand, Neon. Then we have for our elites, we have Mrhappy, we have Ellisan Le'ore, we have Sour Cream and Chives, Velestra of Famfrit, Kyoshi and the Reckless Tea Party of Cactar, Ignis Fairgun from Diablo server, Goetia Valefar of Siren, Jean-Francois, Themacholuis, Hersh, Fersh of Faerie, Phoenix Down for Company on Goblin, Serren from Zodiark, and Renault Chikara. And then we have our premium sponsors. We have Krovos Moonscar, we have Naku Niame, we have Ira. Is that right? Ira and Avon Blanc for Company on Zodiark. Janua Odin of Tomberry. We have Aqua's Sacrifice, Obaidal Shamsi, Spike, Nadi and Kirisame, Rudy Rudiger, TinColossus, Khuja Cross of the Genova server, Ahmed, Kurenai Oni, Abdullah, Killer Hackman, Raul Jr, Darklight 2013, Arthur Ramil Gaming Bishop, and Kiltastic Jones. Remember, if you're someone who's pledged for 5, 10, or 15 and you're over on Patreon and I don't have your name, that's why your name's not popping up on the list, so be sure to do that. As for, before we get into the Q&A, I've been playing Final Fantasy XI this weekend to celebrate the 15th anniversary, so you're going to get video spammed on YouTube of my experiences touring Rendil and showing off some of the stuff that may be a little bit more recent, as Final Fantasy XIV has been seeing non-stop DDoS for the last week and a half, and thus I've barely even logged on. It's just, I've actually had a video idea that I've been working on. Every day I try to log in and get work done on it, I just start red balling and crashing, and it's just not worth trying to do until after they acknowledge that they've come up with some sort of combat or the DDoSing has slowed down of any kind. Until I can tell that, unfortunately, the video idea that I've been working on for the past week or so probably won't get finished without some extreme luck and not lagging. Who knows, maybe I should just try to make it and then make a spoof version of it, because I have footage of all the lagged attempts that I have to get footage for that video itself, so maybe it could be 2 videos in one. Who knows? Anyway, we've got 15 questions on the forums, then we'll take some questions from the Twitch chat, so let's get started. Alright, so joining us for the first question is Aloha, who's really begging for my attention right now, although now he definitely wants to escape. Hello, Happy. What to do with the extra Verity tomestones? The gear you purchase with them is not sellable, not tradable, and cannot desynth. The other blue gear in the game you can sell to NPC and or desynth. Will Verity gear eventually become sellable and desynthable in later patches? Should I buy gear and hold on to them, or not even bother spending my Verity? Verity gear in 4.2 will likely be desynthesizable, so if you want to hold on to it until then yes, it should definitely be desynthesizable. The most recent tomestones are usually not desynthesizable. It's not until they get kind of phased out, where Verity tomestones are merged with Creation tomestones and then Creation are uncapped. It's not until then usually that you see desynthesis caps and desynthesis availability go up at all. So yeah, I would say if you are worried about desynthesis in particular, that holding on to them till 4.2, I can pretty much guarantee you that those items will be desynthesizable by then. So it's up to you. If you want to wait, then wait. If you don't, then don't. Alright, number 2, hey, Mr. Move? Well, it's because I moved? That's not very original. Seems like they can beat the dragon. They did beat the dragon. On to the notorious Titan next. Hey, we already know they are absolutely working on the 4.3 Ultimate as we speak, so we'll just have to wait and see what it is. So, we have a roulette. I know you had an idea for me with dice, but I think you said you were going to hold off another week on that. So, let's see. We have a gear question, a cheesy meta question, and the ultimate joke. I'm going to go with a gear question, something a little bit simpler here. I tank in Keepers of the Lake as a I-300 plus paladin in the entire dungeon and Sword Oath with no problems in the other level 50 dungeons too. How does item level gear influence your effectiveness in synced dungeons? So item level sync works in a few different weird ways. When we first got a hold of it, the idea was supposed to be that unsynced gear was going to be superior, but that's not at all how it's kind of worked. You pretty much end up being kind of at max efficiency that you could possibly be at, excluding materia. Item level syncs generally have very funky interactions with materia, where a lot of the times materia is rendered either super weak or just completely, I think most of the time it's just rendered completely just no effect at all. You're definitely stronger. Or as strong as you could possibly be with those item level syncs, especially when you're up against other players that are maybe level relevant. I couldn't tell you if you like being I-300 in that dungeon is different than being I-200 in that dungeon when the cap is only 130. I'd imagine they're exactly the same. But I just go into dungeons, blow through them, and then just like my brain turns off for the 15 minutes I'm in the dungeon and then turns back on when the dungeon's over. So yeah, that's my understanding of it. And so that's I guess that's my answer. When you sink down, you're super OP. As OP as you could possibly be for that level. Alright, number 3. Hey, Mr. Happy. I have a question also. Hi. Hajime Tabata said they want to port 15 to the Switch, and if they cannot use the Luminous engine, they can try to use a different engine like Unreal. What are the chances of Square Enix doing that? So Final Fantasy 15, for the most part, has been what I like to call a technical playing ground for Square Enix ever since it came out. The Luminous engine was inferior to the Unreal engine in so many different ways. But they are basically doing their best to kind of maximize what they think they can do on the Luminous engine and almost use it kind of as a learning experience. So the odds of them ever putting 15 on the Switch, even though he's made those statements, that's more of a cultural thing where people ask him if it could be on the Switch and he doesn't want to say no. Because he doesn't know what could be possible or, what technologically could be possible or if they would ever take on a project like that. But at the same time, he's not going to say yeah, either because of whatever reason, like the Luminous engine not really being something that's going to work for a Switch or the hardware on the Switch itself. He's trying to be as respectful to that question every time he gets it as possible. So I would not expect 15 on the Switch, and I also wouldn't expect 14 on the Switch. We got rid of the PlayStation 3, and not that the Switch is as weak as a PlayStation 3, but in terms of technology holding back what is possible for the MMO as a whole, I'd say that the Switch is definitely more viable to hold back Final Fantasy 14 like the PS3 did in certain aspects, probably because the hardware just isn't as strong. Whereas the PS4, new hardware comes out that is PS4 compatible, like the Pro and whatnot, and they can patch things in to make use of that new technology, whereas doing it on a completely different platform is something that's going to take an entirely different set of assets and skill set to probably do. So I don't think you're ever going to see 14 on the Switch. I really don't think you'll ever see 15 on the Switch, unless you see the Pocket Edition of 15 on the Switch, which would be weird having it on both the phone and the Switch, but I couldn't really fault them at that point. Alright, number 4. Hey, Happy. Since so many Garleans wear a Gunblade, I want a Gunblade job since 2.0, but I've never seen a discussion about specific job, so I guess Square Enix won't add it. They could call the job like Cypher or something. It means Witch Knight. So ultimately, the Gunblade is a weapon. You can apply a Gunblade to a job you create, and it just has to be the core aspect of your job. Like Red Mage, the core aspect is the rapier and the it's been so long since I've had to call it something. The fucking floaty magic orb that you stick to the end of it. I used to be so proud remembering what it was, but I haven't touched Red Mage in months, so I totally forgot. It's like ethereal something. And then for Samurai, it's the katana. Warrior, it's the axe. So it needs to be something that is really a good central idea to the entire job. And you don't just want to shoehorn it into a job. And you probably don't want to make a job that's literally just, well, I have a gunblade, whoop-de-fucking-do. Like, you probably don't want to do that either. But that being said, there's nothing to stop them from designing a job based around it. There's nothing to even stop them from taking a job that already exists in Final Fantasy lore and applying a gunblade to it. But the odds of them doing that, I feel like, are probably not very high until after we've kind of reached a point where the Garleans are more integrated into our technology, because we're not using their technology. We're basically using whatever Cid re-outfits or makes of his own accord. And he's not really mimicking their technology, or we're not really being handed that technology. So I wouldn't expect for that to happen remotely anytime soon, but it's not that it could never happen. As for this last one, keep my fingers crossed for your Geomancer. Yeah, no, Geomancer. I think it's going to happen. I think Dancer and Geomancer, not just because of the teases and the drops that we've had in the game, but I think that those are just pretty good candidates for the next expansion at the current moment until we see more from the story itself. All right, number 5. Greetings, Mr. Happy. Hope the week has been good to you. Yeah, I'd say it wasn't been a bad week other than the lagging in 14, but everyone's been dealing with that, so can't really say that makes my week any better or worse. No DPS queue woes this week. Well, with everyone disconnecting, there's no queues at all. So, questions away. Random question that popped into my head. You think 14 would be as big now if it hadn't failed so spectacularly? No, actually I don't. I don't think 14 would have as many players right now if it didn't fail horribly first time. That story built them such a huge PR when A Realm Reborn came out, that it's hard to say because, you know, with Stormblood, obviously we're not really talking about the fact that 1.0 is the failed games. That's like not the topic anymore, Stormblood. It's how can we improve the product that we've made. But you have to wonder if it would have ever gained that level of traction if it didn't have such a big topic, such a big monumental task that they had to take on to even make it a playable game. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it would have been as big if it didn't fail so hard the first time around. To edit, this was originally going to be about the gain of favor of RNGs for more good pulls, and he gave me a character. That's Brave Exvius, I'm assuming. So Dark Knight, as someone who plays and loves it, I agree. Despite being on a world first squad, it needs a bit of help. That said, I don't think TBN should be cheaper. It's too strong. If anything, Dark Art should be cheaper. Yeah, I guess you got a point. TBN has too much power in it to make TBN cheaper. It's just the applicable use of it versus the sacrifice of what you gain. Like the fact that every time you use TBN, there is a net potency loss if you were to otherwise use that NP on something else. It's mostly about mitigating that difference, so that if you were to use TBN, get blood, and then do Dark Arts Blood Spiller with the blood you got from TBN, that the MP cost, if the MP cost of using TBN plus the Dark Arts going into the Blood Spiller was equal to just using the MP, comparing the difference between just using the Dark Arts and the Blood Spiller, where you have an entire TBN worth. There just needs to, if there was some way to close that gap, it would make things a lot easier, but you're right. The TBN has so much power poured into it that reducing the MP cost starts to you start to worry about where the power of the job really needs to be for that to be fair. So, yeah, as someone who doesn't play Dark Knight, that's kind of my best assessment of the situation. You probably have to talk to someone who's a little bit more in tune with playing the job on a regular basis. What if they gave Dark Knight a crazy amount of utility? Like, you can't give them a crazy amount of utility. You can't just say, add a crazy amount of utility. Shake It Off was what Warrior got, and that gave them all the utility they needed. So, for all I care, it could be Dark Arts TBN, which is also a huge MP investment, is an AoE shield, and I don't know. Or maybe you make it so that if you Dark Arts TBN, when the shield breaks, like, a shield appears on everybody else. I don't know. Like, there's other ways you can go about it, but you can't just give them crazy utility. You can't just make Dark Passenger, like, insanely strong, Dark Mind being insanely strong. But I do think that the abilities you're mentioning are abilities that could probably use some love, especially because of the way the other tanks end up functioning. Alright, number 6. Hey, Happy. As a white mage, I've been seeing quite a bit of anti-spell speed mentality around the terms of materia. Or is what I focus on. So, actually, Keo, which is a good friend of mine who's a very experienced healer, I'm just going to regurgitate his words about spell speed. I guess I'll regurgitate them after I read the whole thing. Having 1600 spell speed, I know it's about 7 to 8% decrease in GCD. This has made more helpful utility-wise. Pure numbers I've had many times. So, what are your thoughts on that? So, I'm not going to regurgitate my thoughts. I have thoughts on it, but I'm going to regurgitate, at least to the best of my memory, what Keo had to say. Spell speed's a very playstyle-focused thing. Spell speed, a lot of the time, people can argue that it feels really good to have and that allows them to get things out faster. But a lot of the time, heals are very premeditated, in a sense. Okay, let me cut off where Keo said. Keo said that spell speed is very, very situational, or very player-centric. You know, some people like a lot of spell speed, some people don't, and off-stats aren't really that big a difference anyway, so that actually is a playstyle difference that either can work. I remember him personally saying he was a big fan of critical hit rate because of the damage increases. So, let me add my 2 cents in on top of that. The big thing with spell speed is that most healing is not done reactively, it's done proactively. What I mean by that is, big damage is coming out. I will cast a cure. So casting that cure faster doesn't really create much of an opportunity window there. You could say you're casting your DPS spells faster, but your DPS spells could also just straight up be doing more damage. So that's my personal feeling on spell speed, is that so much is premeditated that the only time you see a lot of value in spell speed is if you're reacting to something like somebody screwed up a mechanic and they took an extra hit and you need to get that heal out in time and you don't have any off global cooldown heals. But because the game is so focused around output being very coordinated and calculated, spell speed decreases in value the more organized you actually have to be. It's good for learning a fight, but once you've learned something, in my opinion, it loses a lot of its value. That being said, if you really enjoy spell speed, off stats in this game make so little of a difference that if Honestly, I don't care if I saw White Mage in full spell speed, I saw White Mage in full crit, and I was doing 0-4 Savage, and both of them were good enough to beat it. I personally wouldn't give a shit as another player. I'd be like, cool, both of those work, great, fantastic, wonderful. And that's true of every off stat in the game, pretty much. That unless you're trying to squeeze out the last little like few hundred points of damage in order to kill the boss before they enrage, it doesn't fucking matter. If you enjoy spell speed, go for it. And it does have its pros, it does have its cons, but so do the other stats. So go for it. Alright, number 7. Hello, Haps. Hello. First time asking here, so I have a bonus of one more chance to raise money for Extra Life once you've settled in. We actually have another charity event on the 28th called Gaming Tuesday, which is not Extra Life related, so I probably won't get to raise anything extra. Just keep that in mind if you're watching this right now, that November 28th, which is a Tuesday, Gaming Tuesday, going to be raising money for charity. Again, that day, I'll have full details on a video coming soon. My question is simple. I played 11 for more than 8 years, and I kind of liked that there were so many gear options that were relevant. I know that a game needs to step forward and bring better gear every patch, but the feels that I get when my Kitty Pants or Okote were amazing. It's something I don't get in 14. Drop is nice. So I know it's not a gameplay question, which is fine. I'm not a gameplay developer, so it's fine if you don't ask me a gameplay question. I'd like to know your opinion on the topic. So horizontal and vertical progression, you have to commit to one or the other a lot of the times, because when you start creating too many options, you run into the pros and cons of both of them at the same time. 11 hit this in Secrets of Adolin pretty hard when they started incorporating item level, but still having items with super unique effects. A lot of the times, the item level started being superseded by effects that were too powerful. And then the other way around, if you didn't have a high enough item level, then people were kind of giving you shit at the same time. So let's cover the pros and the cons real quick. Vertical progression, pros, very easy to calculate the progression of gear, and the feeling of getting more powerful is something that is consistent. One of the most potent things in terms of selling gameplay is making you feel stronger, seeing your numbers go up, seeing your character get more powerful. A lot of people get this very euphoric feeling from seeing their character actually noticeably go up in power. Now, power meaning in terms of direct numbers, which isn't always applicable to every other game. The con of that is that gear is very low value on its own, which is why glamour, or the way your character looks, has become so much more important now than it used to be. Where people would commented on it before, they didn't consider being able to wear whatever they want so much as an importance as what they were wearing. Whereas nowadays, because the gear's actual effectiveness and outcome of what your character can actually do means so little, you'll run into people who care more about the appearance than they do about the actual effect. Which is why making sure you can get the best effect while having your favorite type of glamour is something that's so central to MMOs and just gaming in general nowadays. Even when it comes down to skins, being able to play the champion does the exact same thing, but have it look exactly the way you want, like that's a big deal to people, because no matter what, the power curve is always the same there. When it comes to horizontal progression, you run into a different problem, where rewards can feel very powerful for you, but most of the time, the rewards are very incremental. A lot of players don't get a lot of satisfaction from seeing their attacks go up by 30 damage. Because they got this new piece. Ooh, this singular attack went up by 30 on average. Okay, that's not that exciting to a lot of people. It's exciting to some people who are very big on numbers, and I remember being a black mage, getting a new piece. Oh, my Fire 4, bad example, because no one fucking used that. But my Blizzard 4 went up by 30 points with these new legs. Cool. I see that now, and I can compare it directly to the old number, and that's it. That's like a flat number. It always does against this enemy. That's like not as exciting for a lot of people as it can be for others. And then you have unique effects, which can be very exciting. But even in Final Fantasy XI, while gear had a lot of unique effects, the way that it actually impacted your character wasn't so visual. Like if you had a shit ton of enfeebling skill, okay, your enfeebles landed and maybe lasted longer. But that doesn't have the same visual satisfaction that other things may have, like big damage numbers, which is what sells shit nowadays. On top of that, when it comes to horizontal progression, you can hold on to a piece for a lot longer, but the amount of gear walls it creates for new players to get in can be sometimes even worse than the gear walls that are created by item level. They both are just different kinds. Like one of them is, oh, well, every black mage has this item. Oh, you don't have that item? Well, you should go get that item. Okay, can you help me get that item? Nah, fuck that shit, dude. You run into nice people, but don't get me wrong. I've done my fair share of hardcore raiding in 14 and hardcore endgame in 11. And I had this discussion earlier on my stream. There was a fucking shit ton of shitty people in Endgame and Final Fantasy XI. The less you involved yourself with that, the better the community looked. And that's generally true in most games, but for 11, everyone knew each other. So it was almost like just like a high school drama bullshit of just like people who were just all had ego checks all the time and were always looking down on other players that didn't have the same gear and shit. And it was way worse in that elitist endgame than the 14 elitist endgame is. Where 14's elitist endgame is more people who think they're hot shit and talk down to other people versus people who actually are good at the game thinking they're superior. People who are doing world first aren't looking down at other players most of the time and being like, wow, Mr. Oh, item level 310 over here, what a piece of shit. They're like, oh, that dude's item level 310, he's not as geared as me. Like, that's so much less common than people who are like 330 who are pugging shit being like, oh, what the fuck, Bard doing the fucking 2 skills that did them in the wrong order, what a fucking asshole. I see that way more from people who haven't even beaten raids than people who have beat raids. It's fucking insane. So, they both come with pros and cons, and it comes down to personal preference. Combining the systems, there is room for it, but it has to be done carefully. It's more about taking gear and spreading it out over multiple activities, and less about creating super high variance in the gear. Like, if you could only, let's say there's like 3 different raids at the same time, not just like Omega and then 1, 2, 3, but like Omega and Ultima and Gamma or whatever. I don't know. Omega, Ultima, and Diamond. Let's say there were 3 different raid tiers, and you've got like one set of pieces that only come from the Omega, and then you like body pieces and head pieces only come from the other, and you're progressing these things at the same time, and you do them at different set times. Spreading out the gear throughout the activities makes it so people kind of dip their hands, or dip their feet, I guess I should say, in all the different kinds of activities. But it doesn't create more choices, because ultimately, even with horizontal gear, you didn't have many choices. Ultimately, choice in an MMO doesn't exist. If you want to actually do the content that your gear warrants you doing, you will conform into exactly what people want you to do. It happens in every MMO, or the MMO like 14 just doesn't give you many choices, so you never have to worry about being forced into said predicament. So I could do a whole video on just this topic. I've already done what is basically the equivalent of a whole video on this topic and just answering this question. But there's so many facets to it that it ultimately comes down to preference. Trying to merge the systems forcefully is probably going to end up in a disaster. So whichever system you prefer is the system you should probably chase as a gamer in general, since you do get to choose the games that you play. Alright, number 8. Hey, Mr. Happy, how you doing? I'm doing alright. Nice short question. Good after how long that last one was. I was wondering what your current thoughts on Comrades is. Will you stream it more than once? Yes, I will stream it more than once, especially considering that the day of Comrades, I actually have a previous thing that I need to attend. It's not till the evening the thing that I need to attend, but it means that, aloha, god damn it, that I won't get to stream it, like, all day and night, because I'm going to have to dip out earlier than I would have normally anticipated. I think I get asked this question a lot, so I'll make it really short. If you've watched some of the previous episodes, I've answered this recently. I think it's on a nice edge of being really good and not being good at all. It has a lot of customization that wasn't available in the main game. The magic system's improved from the main game. But ultimately, it could just come down to just not being fun because of what you're actually doing. Maybe doing these activities themselves aren't fun. Maybe leveling your character isn't enough of an incentive. Who knows what the story is going to be like, because there is going to be a story element tied to it. You know, how smart is the AI if you want to team up with AI? How feasible is it to solo certain things, since they did say there's a solo aspect to it? You know, is the multiplayer intuitive and promotes working together well enough? They're trying to implement classes through the sigils to do that, but does it work? That is the ultimate question. Does it work? And I don't think we've had enough of a hands-on with it to say yes or no until we get a hold of the full game. So that's where I stand on it right now. It could either be way better than I thought it could be, or it's going to be not good at all. I don't think there's honestly a mediocre. I don't think there's a point where it hits mediocre. I think it's one or the other in terms of extremes. Number 9, hey, Mr. Happy, no bonus. Hope my undying respect is enough. More than enough. Listen, I didn't start the bonus thing. You guys started the bonus thing. Alright. I also make a mean grilled cheese. Okay, never mind. I want the bonus of grilled cheese. I know you're sick of talking about Dark. In fact, if this is just like the Dark question earlier, I might just have to tell you, yeah, that one, and move on to the next one. Let's see. For all we know, jobs like White Mage and Warrior could have been perfectly viable and raised without buffs they got, but we'll never know because Square Enix responded to their feedback so promptly. Well, Warrior wasn't really responded to promptly, I'd say. Warrior, well, I guess it depends. The Warrior, the stance changing thing, but like Shake It Off was a big complaint, and that didn't get addressed till 4.1, so tough call. Let's see, they didn't have really time to. Also, White Mage didn't really get too many changes from what I played at the Media Tour to the full launch, minus I guess some number changes, like the potencies on certain things. And White Mage was more of a just lilies are stupid. That was really the conversation that happens. And White Mage still has that conversation of lilies are stupid. And they are stupid. they're like such a forced mechanic onto the job that it's like, come on now, really? So why did Square Enix allow Dark feedback to marinate for 5 months after only telling us nah? They didn't say no. They just said that they're not just going to knee-jerk reaction buff Dark Knight, whereas numerically speaking, they understood the reasons for Warrior, like for the questions people had about Warrior. Whereas Dark Knight, it's like, it's kind of like Monk in a sense. Dark Knight and Monk have both are jobs that have abilities that have questionable use. And it's not that every ability has to be useful, but at the same time, you look at some other jobs that do have every ability that's useful, and it's like, well, yeah, it's a little bit tougher. The comparisons White Mage and Warrior were getting weren't really fair in a lot of regards, and a lot of them were more fun factor, but a lot of people say Dark Knight's not as fun anymore. So maybe if we start tackling the fun factor of Dark Knight, they'll start listening, because that's when they seem to listen the most, is when there's either a huge skill gap or it's not fun. Those are when they seem to listen the most. So it's hard to say what they're going to be doing, but I don't think they're not looking at Dark Knight. I think they're just not knee-jerk reaction buffing it or anything like that. They're allowing it to kind of marinate over time now that Dark Knight is in its spot and Warrior is in its spot and Paladin is in its spot, and we'll see how it evolves over time. I don't think Dark Knight's going to get completely hung out to dry. It's just not on the docket for like the next thing we see. Alright, number 10. Hey, Haps. I hope you're doing well, and I hope the move was nice and easy. Mel's actually in San Diego right now grabbing more stuff, because while we have all our furniture here, not all of our belongings are here. I got a simple question. I often hear the terms horizontal versus vertical progression. Oh! Well, I kind of defined it earlier, but I didn't make it set. Vertical progression is gear that constantly gets more powerful, so you're basically replacing gear every X amount of months or years. Horizontal progression are pieces of armor that last for much longer and have multiple uses, so you can like use one piece of gear for this, one piece of gear for that, so they have different uses. And they sort of increase diagonally, because like over time, items do get more powerful in horizontal progression, but it's at a much slower pace, so items last much longer, and you generally feel better about holding on to an item for years as opposed to months. So those are the key differences there, is that horizontal progression isn't an upward increase, or not a large upward increase of power. It's more about different effects and different options, whereas vertical progression is a direct increase in power over X amount of months and years. Alright, number 11. Hey, guy. I just got my monk at Samurai to 70. I crafted them at 320 cents. Since you're a monk, I was wondering when you thought of what you thought of a mainly monk skill speed build. So skill speed, no, don't like it. Skill speed's not as bad as it used to be, but skill speed's also still not great, I think, is the best way I could think to put it. Now, most monks aim for about a 1,000 to 1,100. I think 1093 is a sweet number, so that their demolish ticks line up perfectly. I personally forego all that, and I go direct critical hit rate, and I hit monstrously hard, and the numbers are still really, really, really good. So I'm sure any numerical difference I would see from switching to the skill speed, where I have that amount minimum, would probably not be worth the effort of undoing the melds that I currently have. So, yeah, that's it. I just, but a secondary status showing the posted Reddit showing critical and skill speed providing higher DPS. I'm sure that if you actually were to line things up a certain way, by the way, as much as spreadsheets are good for information, off stats in Final Fantasy XIV are so non-influential when it comes to a lot of shit, outside of direct hit rate for like tanks, where it just gets completely out of hand, that the differences are so minor that honestly, in an applicable fight, you probably won't notice it. Any fight, by the way, where I guess actually no, I was gonna say a point that wasn't actually entirely true, because you could argue you have to. I'm just thinking of Bahamut, where for skill speed on a monk, you have so few GCDs on phases 3. Oh, well, I guess I'm just on phase 3, because like anytime you have to leave the boss, then skill speed either increases in value or decreases in value, because in order for skill speed to be noticeable, you need to be using a global cooldown, but it's about how many extra global cooldowns you can get in a given time. So if the amount of skill speed you have only gives you one extra global cooldown over the course of, I guess we'll say, like 15 global cooldowns. You have to weigh how many global cooldowns you get and how much time that actually takes. So there's a whole heaping bit of information. I don't have time to go through the document right now. I am not a fan of skill speed on monk. I do not feel like it's worth switching my current meld out for, but I'm totally in agreement that probably a balanced amount of skill speed with the other stats would be more beneficial than the build that I currently have now. Alright, number 12. Hey, my dude. Not a first time bonus, but have a nice juicy bag. or pizza with double pepperoni, Italian sausage, bacon, trees. That's too much meat, dude. Just give me the pepperoni. I don't need all that. All right. Question 1. I've been playing Dark Knight now, I'm assuming, for a while. I love the jump playstyle, quickly sustained. Blah, okay, yeah. Why do healers never sprint? I don't know. Everyone should be sprinting. I don't care if you're a healer or not. Everyone should be sprinting. Sprint all the time. So, everyone sprint. 2. Do you think we're going to be getting a balcony for apartments? I think it would be a good idea. Will they do it? Not convinced. 3. Crafting gathering through the 14 app when? Yeah, that would require you to actually play your character as opposed to checking like menus. So, no. Question 4. When are you going to drink baked bean coffee? That's fucking disgusting. So, never. Number 13. Hey, Happy, how you doing? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? Yeah, I'm doing alright. Since it's been a long time to get a coveted returner bonus. I don't know what that is, but in the words of Yoshi P, please look forward to it. Hi. Alright, question roulette. Ultimate expectations, Earthly Orzia, the cost of looking good. I would know nothing about that, as you can see. And a mini quest pot. I would take ultimate expectations. I think I know where this is going, though. So far, at least to my knowledge, only 2 groups. Okay, obviously, as of reading this, many more groups have cleared ultimate. So disregard that point. I was talking to some of my friends. They all said they probably wouldn't clear it before 4.2. They are some of the best. They are some of the best players I know, and they don't have the time commitment. My question is, how many clears do you think Square Enix would see for this to be deemed a success? I think it's been deemed a success already. Yoshi P's own words is that it's not just about the number of people that clear it. It's about the number of people talking about it. Ultimate was a big, big deal. And people who have no intentions of ever setting foot into that content have been talking about it in circles all over the place. And Layla had this conversation on State of the Realm last week. It's drummed up so much discussion and talking and interest and people who are improving their skills as players, because let's be honest, if you can do Ultimate, by the time you finish Ultimate, the number of types of progression you're ready for has only increased, and the next raid tier is going to feel like a complete joke compared to the pace of Ultimate. It's going to do all those things. What will it not do? It won't make a casual or mid-core player, excited to do it, because they're probably faced with the overwhelming possibility that they never complete that piece of content. That being said, I think it's, no matter how many people clear it, the fact that people have cleared it has led to it being a success just with the sheer amount of talk that has been driven just by this topic. All right, number 14. Hey, MrSynestrrr, final sim here, and welcome to Mondays with MrSynestrrr, aka MrSynestrrr Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where I ask Khuja Goldsmith desynthesis 316. So I was wondering, how do you make money in Stormblood with Goldsmith desynthesis fast? See, I haven't been keeping up. Desynthesis has not really been in a fantastic spot since some of the materials were made a little bit more available. They changed around some stuff. You generally just desynth everything. When you're doing desynthesis, you level 3 of them on a character and you just desynth everything. And that depends on what you decide to level. You're asking me what to level. I did Weaver and Leatherworker because they're pretty reliable for desynthing gear. Armor is another okay option. You start getting into other things like Culinarian, where you have to kind of have a lot of fish to do a lot of desynthesis there, and it leads to some interesting combinations. But when I do those 3, if I run a dungeon, most of the gear I'm going to be able to desynth, and to me, that's the most important thing. You just desynth everything and sell everything, and that is, for me at least, the fastest way to earn money is to do that. When Verity is eventually desynthesizable, I'll probably do that as well. Alright, number 15. This is the last question on the forums before I grab some Twitch chat questions. Greetings, Happy. Thank you for all your hard work and providing content over these years. Keeping with tradition as a first-time boaster, have a bonus of sponsorship with your favorite jerky company. Do I have a favorite? Savage Jerky? Dude, those guys are... Oh, it's so good. Oh, the jerky. It's so good. Gotta get that Carolina Reaper beef jerky. Get that Mojo Habanero. Yes. Okay. Anyway, why does it take 2 centuries, 4 months, 1 day, 5 years, and 2 seconds for potions to go off? Dude, I've been wondering that myself, and I haven't had the opportunity to interview Yoshi P about it, or to ask him in an interview, but it's on my list of things to ask him in the next interview that I have. 2, why is it that Feint is 120 seconds, Palisade 150 second cooldowns, are longer while their magical equivalents, Addle and Apocatastasis, are shorter? So I'd imagine the most reasonable thing for that is that more often than not, a boss's auto attacks are physical. Now, of course, when it comes to Adel or Apoc, if an enemy's auto attacks are magical, it will apply to those. But more often than not, most enemies in the game have physical auto attacks. So when you use Feint or when you use Palisade, most of the time you're also mitigating auto attacks as well. I can think of scenarios where that's not entirely true. Obviously, Neo Exdeath doesn't auto attack, so that's a great example. And there are enemies that have magical auto attacks, so it doesn't apply there as well. But I'd say, on average, you're going to see that more frequently than the other two scenarios I just named. And three, the most important question here, what's your top 3 jerky flavors? I think I just gave away 2 of them, Carolina Reaper and Mojo Habanero. I, myself, am not a huge teriyaki beef jerky kind of guy. Sometimes I just like a nice classic beef jerky. But if I'm going to go for a flavor, dude, the Carolina Reaper... Actually, the Carolina Reaper is nice, but the Ghost Pepper Buffalo is more tolerable of a spice level and actually has a good zing to it. So I'm going to say Ghost Pepper Buffalo, Classic, and the Mojo Habanero, and those are specifically Savage Jerky because those guys have awesome beef jerky. There are some other good flavors, honey barbecue, teriyaki, you know, those, depending on what you're into, those could be good for you, but for me, I'm going to go with those 3 flavors. All right, now, so with those forum questions out of the way, now I'll take some questions from the chat itself. So, chat, ask away. All right, so the first question we have from the Twitch chat, hey, Happy, how do you think the next expansion could introduce a healer and a tank with the way balance is right now? Obviously, we just had that discussion a little bit earlier regarding balance. It's tough, man. Sometimes you just got to forego balance and just do shit in an MMO because it's fun, though. Like, if you're always worried about balance, you can never get anything done. League of Legends is 139 champions. Do you think that they would ever reach a point of equilibrium? No, because every time they want to do something to their game, it's gonna throw everything into flux. And sometimes you just gotta try something, you gotta fix what you've tried, and you gotta make it work. And I think if you're always so focused on trying to make everything perfectly balanced, it can't ever be perfect without everybody having everything exactly the same, which is boring. You gotta just say at some point, fuck it. We're doing it because it's a fun idea. It's a video game. Let's try to have some fucking fun. Yeah. So I think that's what they're going to have to do is say, fuck it. We want to do it. It's fun. We'll do it. All right. It's done. And they also get to rebalance the game at the beginning of an expansion. So you can try to balance it around having 4 tanks. I don't think that's going to work out well for us, though. The next question I have is another tank-related one. Question, what is your thoughts about tanks not using aggro skills or relying on aggro management skills? I think it's a degree of... It depends on your mastery of the game. It's kind of like how healers will heal with their off-global cooldowns and then limit their global cooldown usage as much as possible so that they can DPS. It's a matter of mastery. Like, if you have mastered a job and you have mastered the concept of teamwork, if you're a ninja, you've mastered the job, you're giving Shade Walkers to the tanks. You're smoke screening the person who's generating the most aggro. That's not something someone has to demand you do. And then if you're the tank in that case, you know you're going to get that Shade Walker. You know what your enmity generation is like with your tools when you just go through your damage rotations and focus on those. And then you have other people using diversion and it's just about maximizing the effectiveness of your job and your comfort with the job and your mastery of the game as a whole. A lot of the times people get a little too ballsy with it. Like if you're playing with complete strangers, you don't know what their skill level is like, and yet you try to play as if everybody should know everything and be perfect. That creates more problems than being, than when you play with people you do know, because they have mastered it and you can rely on them and you know that they know what to do. So I'm always of the opinion that if you're going through something like an expert roulette and you have a ninja that's not shade walkering, or you have someone who's not popping their enmity tools, you may want to state to them, hey, would you mind popping your enmity tool? Could you pop your enmity tool real quick? So that way I can output more damage. You can word it nicely, but a lot of the times you end up just having to suck it up and say, okay, this is where this group is. I have to do something different. Maybe I have to use my aggro skills. Maybe I don't know. There's just decisions like that. As a healer, maybe, this tank doesn't use any cooldowns. I could ask him to use cooldowns, but ultimately, maybe I have to heal more this dungeon. Maybe you have to make those decisions sometimes. And it's a matter of knowing when you're in the spot where you can make one decision versus when you're in a spot where you can make a different kind of decision. And I feel like a lot of people don't take that into mind. They try to play one way and one way only. And that is more selfish then even though you're trying to do what's supposed to be like party efficient, that's more selfish to assume everybody's on the same page as you without communicating or without knowing than it is to just try and force it upon them. All right, and that is actually going to be a wrap for this episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. I covered some smaller questions in the chat, but I decided not to include any of the ones that you didn't see here in the video itself. So thank you to those of you for asking your questions on Twitch chat. We actually had some pretty good conversations about certain things there, but going to be cutting some of those out for length purposes. But anyway, that's a wrap for this week. Remember, if you want to ask a question for Mondays with Mr. Happy, be sure to ask your questions in the forum thread that's under the YouTube video. If you're watching here on Twitch, you can find the forum by going to Dream Network TV or by going to the YouTube video and finding the actual direct forum link, which is when you'll be able to ask questions, because I don't make the forum while I'm on the Twitch live stream. I do it right before the YouTube video goes live. Blah, 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 blah. On that note, though, I'm hungry. I'm going to hang out with the Twitch chat for just a couple more minutes while I figure out who I want to host. But for those of you on YouTube, thank you. Thank you again to our Patreon supporters. And I will see all you fine ladies and gentlemen next week for the next Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you. And until then, take care.